And I would have never imagined that me being honest about my story would cause me to help people like I never have in my entire life. How, when you begin to chase your purpose, it's amazing how your problems begin to
I
change.
think,
Yeah,
yeah.
if people don't know their purpose, you will certainly know your problems.
Ooh,
Because
that's deep. Mark Delaney never intended to write a book, but he had significant events in his life that taught him wisdom he had to share with others. Mark was a man who always wanted to make a difference and help others, but knew he had to fix his own problems first. He felt like a caged lion and realized, after years of struggle, that what he truly needed was freedom, not fixing.
mm,
When Mark obtained his freedom, he looked around and saw many people living inside of this same trap. And that is why he wrote One Step to Freedom. So, Mark, welcome to Triumph Talks. I thank you for taking some time out of your day to join me. I've really looked forward to meeting you.
I'm thrilled to do this. I thank you for having me. I When I reached out to you, you said, hey, send me your book. I'm going to read it first, which really I felt so honored by that you take this so seriously, that you're serious about this podcast and serious about your listener, and the fact that you have read the book and want to talk about it. I am very excited to have this conversation.
Well, it was a great book, and you and I actually have a lot in common. As I read your book, there's so many principles that you teach, and even the cover of your book just grabbed me because I do a lot of prison ministry. I work with incarcerated veterans, and so I was very intrigued by your cover and interested to see how you were talking about freedom. You know, by having these prison bars on the cover. And of course, as we get into this, we'll find out just what type of prisons you're referring to.
Yeah,
And it really is something for everyone and not just those who are incarcerated. Although you
yeah,
were just telling me that today you were in prison
yeah.
working
I
with
just was there
inmates.
today with
Yeah.
inmates, so
So it's definitely fitting for them, of course. It's a lot of really just breaking habits that keep us down and keep us trapped. And of course, a lot of times the things that lead people to the actual prison are habits that they just haven't been able to escape, that maybe not be legal ones. So anyway, well, let me get started by asking the first question that I have for you, and that is, what inspired you to write this book?
I had to write the book. I had to write the book. I didn't really have a desire to be an author. I didn't. It wasn't the plan. I didn't have. I still don't take any pride in saying I wrote a book. I just felt like I was something. There was something I learned about life and I experienced, and then I saw, oh my goodness, I think everyone has this same dilemma that I had. I'm like,
Mhm.
I can't let this thought just sit inside of me that is so, it is so liberating to me. I need other people to know. I
Yeah.
cannot let my story just sit inside of myself. And so I had to write it. And it took about 4 years. I was living it while I was writing it.
Oh,
There
interesting.
was no AI used.
Mhm, yeah.
It was just the real me and the real people in my life and real steps I took. And I had to write the book.
Well, the way that you organize the book is fantastic. It's very structured, and you start with a principle and explain it, and then you give your story, and then you share. Uh, you call it my story. I say your story, referring to you, and then you say your story. So
Mm,
you're sharing your personal experience, and then you're addressing the readers, and then you're providing an activity or a challenge or call to action. It's just very easy. It's easy to understand what you're teaching, and it's easy to move it into an application. And I think
mm.
that's why your book really, I can see it being extremely effective for any type of trap, as you call them, that
Yeah,
people may
because
find
it
themselves.
literally is, it's the same.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to hear is that men read it. I've had men tell me, I don't read books, but I
Mhm.
read it in a weekend. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I reached my goal.
It is
So,
extremely approachable. I can see that. Although I did not read it that fast because I really wanted to take my time and
yeah.
And there's just so much. And of course, I see a lot of the principles that you're teaching being the similar ones that I use. When I go in prison, I work with the veterans to help them with PTSD, with narrative therapy, and you've got a lot of similar activities and messaging. Of course, I'm a huge believer in the healing power of telling our stories,
Yeah.
writing it, but then telling it. And that's what you're doing with this
Yeah.
book. And so I totally know what you mean though. You just have to share it. And
Yeah.
the truth is our wisdom is more valuable than gold. Really it is. I mean, if you think about it, if you got to choose between being a multimillionaire and having to give up all your memories, and all the lessons that you learned, would you ever trade it? I don't know that
Yeah.
we ever would, and we really stop and think about it that way. So,
Yeah. It's interesting. A podcast like this, there might be people watching this who think that the goal is to look at Mark Delaney and read his book. And if people feel trapped in life, I hope they do.
mm,
But really, the goal of this podcast is anyone listening out there, what's your story and why aren't you telling it?
dang, you need to be my co-host
There,
because you
there
are
are
speaking.
people that I
Yeah,
just know how much.
yeah,
I said, you see, you mentioned it in the bio that I just wanted to help people.
mm,
And I felt trapped out of that life.
mm,
And what I found is when I told my story, that's what helped people
yes,
in ways that I would have never thought. And I would have never imagined that me being honest about my story would cause me to help people like I never have in my entire life.
yeah. It's
My
a
own,
powerful way to
some of
serve.
my relatives, my own daughter, like friends, like things have happened because I was honest about my story with people. And so there are people that are watching this podcast. They should not be impressed by me. They should look in the mirror and ask themselves, when is my story going to be told? When is the book in me going to be written?
Yeah.
That's what. And if someone's not ready to tell their story, then read my book so that you tell your story.
hmm You're
Because
right. That's what happens is because you share so much along the way. It really is what makes your principles meaningful is to see how you learned it or how it applied to your life. And I think that's what happens when we are really inspired by someone, then we can emulate them and then we become the example to the next person. And I
yeah,
just think it's really a core principle of humanity. We've been telling our stories since the dawn of time.
mm,
Um, Writing on cave walls and totem poles, and
yeah,
there's I think there is that you talk about. I think we do have this need, and it's right there. It's more available to every human being than it's ever been in the past. Everyone has access to share their story on these platforms, and so many different types of platforms too. So as
maybe
well as
it's too simplistic to look at life this way, but
yeah.
maybe there's two kinds of people: the people who tell their story and the people who hide their story. Maybe it's
Whoa,
too
that's deep.
simplistic. But I
I,
think there are many people, because I see it everywhere. Although I go to prisons and I talk to people wearing orange and the back of their shirt says inmate,
yeah,
the regular life I live in, the grocery store I go to, the church I go to, friends I have, people are living as inmates everywhere. We just dress it up better.
yeah,
We
yeah.
just
You really make that point very well in your book too. This,
My message is freedom is for you.
yeah.
We can have it. Freedom doesn't have to be just this great theme we live in a movie. We can have it in our life, and we must.
Well, that's the perfect segue to my next question. What do you hope people will take from reading your book? And I think you started to answer that question, but I'd love you to go a little deeper with that if you would.
Oh, uh, I want people to know that they don't have to keep fixing themselves. They can go live their purpose instead. I talk to so many people who have spent years trying to clean up their life, improve their behavior, and it's like they're living in a cage trying to perfect themselves and tweak their habits. And well, when I get better, and I just want to say to all those people, you can stop trying to fix yourself. Instead, go be who you were made to be. Go chase your purpose instead. And everyone can do it. And it's amazing how when you begin to chase your purpose, go live out your adventure with people, it's amazing how your problems begin to change. But most people think that we have to fix our problems first. And that's what keeps us in the cages.
That is a remarkable insight. And it's true. I think we really get trapped with that. I think part of it is, and some things are fixable and some things just need to be, maybe the less attention you give it, the more it
Yeah.
gets out of our life, versus focusing on
Yeah.
the fixing instead of the living of our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I have your book over my shoulder on my bookshelf, but I am going to grab it now. Um, because I like to share what I took from reading your book and see what you can add to it. So
No, I can't wait.
see what I pulled from it. I used it like a workbook. So the first quote that I want to share is actually from the introduction. And it's basically where you're talking about freedom. And your book is, one step to freedom. So how you define freedom is really what I pulled from this. So it says,
Mhm.
the core of freedom is being able to live out the life for which you were made. Basically what you just said, but here it is in the book. Freedom is the ability to be comfortable in your own skin. We all have problems. We all have reasons to be insecure. We have all messed up. But one question matters. Will I be the person I was made to be?
Mm.
And that's such a perfect introduction to everything that you're about to teach the people that read your book.
It it brings tears to my heart when you say that last sentence.
Yeah.
Who are you made to be? Because when we talk to people in our work with people, we help people with addiction problems, other types of behaviors, marriage problems, self harm, all types of problems. And when they come to us and they just kind of throw out the mess of their life, we basically, the first thing we say to them is one thing matters. Who were you made to be?
Yeah.
Do you want to go be that person?
Yeah.
And most people, that is the breath of air that they need to receive, because it
It's
feels
almost
like,
like a permission slip too that you're giving them to
yes,
say, here you go. Stop worrying about the things you're worrying about and start focusing on the positive instead of the negative, right? Which is, who are you? What do you want? Who do you want to be? And I ask, the question I always ask is, the men that I'm working with is, who do you want to serve? And
yeah,
what is your unique ability because of the
yeah,
trauma that you've been through? What has that enabled you? What has that given you
yeah,
that you can use to help others?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because when you spent years in your life with whatever behavior you're trying to stop, and you're trying everything you can to stop it, and when you go to someone else and you admit it to them, you kind of think that they're going to give you the next idea of how
Right,
to
right.
change it. In your
What's the
heart,
what's the solution that hasn't worked yet, but
yeah,
that
and in your heart, you know it's not going to work.
Yeah,
And for someone to look right past it and say, "Well, who are you made to be?"
yeah.
It's like, wait a second, aren't you supposed to give me 10
Ooh,
steps
that's
to?
one of those quotes I highlighted later in the book that,
Yeah,
yeah, you had
go
someone
ahead.
named, I think his name was Alan, that asked you just that question.
Yes, Alan. Yes.
Alan, yeah, is he the one that really kind of helped you to discover that thought
Yeah.
process just by
He
asking you that question, doing that
yeah.
for you?
When I finally opened my heart and said, "This is the real me," which is the heart. I was hiding my story. That was my problem. I was hiding my story.
Yeah.
When I finally told my story, he didn't try to fix anything. He didn't say anything about the problem. He asked me, "What's it holding you back from?" And that was like mind blowing. It was like,
Yeah.
wait,
What could you be? What is, yeah, it's sort of
yeah, you're
completely
supposed to
turning it
dig into
around.
my problem.
Yeah.
and fix it. And instead, it's like there was a book called Mark's Purpose, and
Mm.
it's like it had been dusted over. And it's like Alan picked it up and went
And helped you
and
to
showed me the
realize
cover of the
that book
book.
exists.
What's your purpose,
That's
Mark?
so good.
Is
And you
beautiful.
talk a lot about that. I mean, in your book, there's this is just one example. You've got a lot of cartoons,
Yeah.
and you're basically using this metaphor. It's perfect, and I can't wait to talk about the end of the book. I'm not going to give it away yet, but you know, you talk about this path that you're on your path, and then something bad happens. And in this cartoon I showed, this bad thing is a tree that's
Yeah.
fallen across the path,
Yeah.
and so you go from this life that you're made for to suddenly hiding in the bushes, which
Yeah.
is akin to hiding your story, as you're saying,
Yeah.
and hiding the real you because a problem came along.
Yeah.
And that's just that's something we all face. So if you don't mind, I want to read, I highlighted a little quote next to this page. It says, the following question must be answered correctly because it is a key component to regaining our freedom. Why did I leave the path? It was my response to what happened. My human pride gave me a false pathway to save myself. To be honest, I naturally blame the event for making me leave the path. But that answer doesn't solve anything. If I believe the event sent me off the path, then it is what has the power to keep me off the path.
Mm.
And so, the idea being that really, to start out, I think we could say we all come here into this life with a purpose. I think
Yeah.
that it's built in, and we're moving along, and then life starts happening and things seem to come up and there are obstacles. And that's another thing I like to talk about, is that when you do decide who you want to serve or what your purpose is, just because you run into trouble doesn't mean it's not the right purpose. And I
Yeah.
think it's really, really easy to say, oh, well, I guess that wasn't it because it didn't work out the way that I expected it to.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up that part because I think everyone's story is very much the same.
Mm.
We're born and instinctually it's like, man, there's something good for me to do in this world. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is, but my life's gonna make a difference.
Yeah.
And then something happens. Maybe a number of things happen, but it causes us to lose our way and change how we think. And I think the massive mistake that we instinctually make is to think that the events in our life, the things that were done to us or the things that we did, we think that's why we lost our way.
Mm.
And so then there's no way forward. It was just like, well, I'm here because that happened. And I can't unwind that thing happened. So I guess I'm just going to stay here over here in this bush,
In this bush.
hiding and coping my life away.
You got the crouching kid in the bush. And I think there's probably some people who maybe never have really identified their purpose.
Yeah.
But those are the people that are distracted by habits that entrap them because they don't know where they're trying to go. So
Yeah.
because I suspect there may be some people watching this who have never instinctively felt like they had a purpose or that
Yeah.
their life was going to matter. And that could be tied to how they were raised, what they were taught as a child or not taught as a child. Um, but the truth of the matter is, once you lock into your purpose and you get on that path,
Yeah.
you're unstoppable.
Yeah.
And drugs or alcohol or whatever the addiction is, food, stops mattering because, like you said, what is it keeping me from? Well,
Yeah.
we want the thing that's at the end of that path strong enough
Mm.
that it makes us not want the things we sort of escape to the bush with. I think.
Yeah. If people don't know their purpose, you will certainly know your problems.
Ooh,
Because
that's deep. I
yeah,
like that.
because the problems,
Wow.
life, you think about that path in the forest, that metaphor, like the storm is going to hit everyone.
Mm,
But if you're on your path of purpose, okay, there's a storm. I
yeah.
can stop for a minute. We're good. We're okay. But if I'm lost and there's a storm comes, it's overwhelming. It's
Yeah.
just like, here's one more thing that's stopping me from the life I was made to live. And so people, when people don't know their purpose, there's really no option but to focus on your problems.
That really is the answer. That's the answer to problems. Name the problem, purpose will fix it.
Yes.
Being driven to something
Yeah.
positive. And I really believe that, you could be driven to go rock climb. I don't know, and that's good. But there's something about a purpose that serves others that
Yeah.
makes it so that you won't give up because you have
Yeah.
other people counting on you. There's something that
Yeah.
really kind of takes it to the next level. Um,
Yeah.
so on the next page from the quote I just read, so like I said, you have this really organized in a great way, all of the chapters. So you have the explanation, your story, Mark's story, my story, the reader, and the
Hmm.
challenge. So I want to read the challenge that you gave in this chapter,
Hmm.
if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
All right, just so people kind of get an idea of the challenges that you give. Think about the life altering situations you have faced. Examine your response. What does your response say about you? This conversation is about your freedom. So think about this from the perspective of becoming free. This does not mean you are to blame for what happened, and we are not trying to understand the actual event that happened. We are working to understand our own response to the event that took place.
Mm.
Take some time and journal about the situations that shaped your life. Reflect on your responses. Oh, and you do also have in your book pages for journaling. I don't know
Hmm.
if that shows up. But so after you read that, now we have a page to go journal. That is so key. And that is where I think what you bring to people is different than a lot of your, I don't know, addiction recovery type processes or just trauma, in that you're not analyzing the event at all. You're just analyzing it's this focusing down farther beyond the event, saying, what was my
Yeah.
response? Why did I respond that way? And I really think that's key.
Yeah. It was freedom. It really enabled me to see that so differently. I think I'm sure in the book I talk about the trumpet story
Yeah,
where
yeah.
the day
That's
I
in the chapter I just read from. Yeah.
yeah, the day I went to join the band and the band teacher, I tried to play the trumpet and I couldn't make a noise and he said your lips are too big. And that really impacted the rest of my childhood from 6th grade all the way through high school.
Mm,
And looking back, it was like, oh my, it it wasn't about what the band teacher said. It wasn't about the trumpet or my lips. My response showed that I was afraid of what other people thought about how I looked.
mm,
And as long as I lived that way, I would never be free.
yeah. Yeah. It just applies to every way we trap ourselves
Yeah,
in all kinds of ways that our mindset is skewed.
yeah,
And so I like this. I like what your challenge is. And of course, you have a challenge with every chapter. Um, and they're really good. They're not, it's like you said, or like I said, I guess, it's an approachable book in that you don't have real super complicated assignments. It's just very mindful work and meaningful work. I think that you have people doing, and like I said, you got lines for them to write down their thoughts, and it's kind of like all encompassed here. So I'm going to move to the next to another chapter, and this chapter is chapter 8, and the title of this chapter is "What is the one step to freedom?" And so I'm going to read out. This is, we've kind of been talking about this, but the journey of the first part of this book brings us to this one question: what is the one step to freedom?
mm,
Come out of hiding. That's it. Step out of hiding.
yeah,
Like, talk about simplifying things. I mean, and then of course
yeah,
you go on from there. So I'm going to turn the page actually because I wrote myself a note to turn the page. So that's the one thing. And then over here in your story section, I wanted to just read a little bit from that. And it says, looking back, I think people saw me as a good man. I held respectable positions in leadership. I could use my career as a way of boosting my reputation. I didn't think much of myself as a man other than the jobs I held, but this was trapping me. My work became a source of identity for me. I could point people to that, and hopefully they would think highly of me. And so, that's just part of the story that you give as an example. And
Yeah.
then we turn the page.
Can
We
I just interject for a second?
I would love you to. Yes.
Without freedom, we really have no choice but to bob and weave our way through life, pretending,
Mm,
compensating. It's no way
yeah.
to live.
Just stop hiding it, and
Yeah, putting
and
on
that
a
is just
mask, a different mask for every person. It's so
mhm.
exhausting.
Mm.
Freedom is just so liberating. You never have to compensate again.
I think we really do tend to allow life and society to make us think that we need these masks. And that's such a perfect example is your job. I teach fitness classes, so I'm that, or I'm a publisher, or
Hmm.
and the core of who we are, yeah, we reflect that in the work that we do, but that starts to overshadow
Yeah,
and affect our, as you wrote, kind of our esteem of ourselves. Other
yeah.
people might not realize. I think we look at each other and we don't really know how trapped that other person is.
When
Um,
we talk to people, and there was a whole month I was asking people everywhere, who do you know that's living the life they want to live?
that's a good question.
And most people
Yeah.
will say, well, I'm not sure anyone does. And it's scary to me. It's scary to me that people in a room will admit, well, I don't know that anyone is living the life they want to live.
Yeah.
What's more scary to me is if we're going to admit that, why don't we lock the door and decide together we're not leaving until we figure out how to live the life we want to live? Because if we're going to live this life together, we might as well live it full and free and be who we're made to be. We
So when you go
can.
into the prisons, are these the messages you're bringing them, or are you working with them through your book? Is that what you do? I'm curious
Well,
about that.
we have a program called the Purpose Mastermind. That's an
Okay.
8-week journey.
Mhm.
That book, One Step to Freedom, is one of those 8 conversations expanded into a book.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but that's 1/8 of the program, and these are the conversations we have
Mm.
because the conversations happening inside of the prison are the same conversations we take anywhere else because a
Mm.
human's a human.
Mhm.
The difference is the prison looks different where I went to this morning, but there are other people that their prison is $1 million house. Other
Yeah.
people, their prison
Those
is
bills,
this
right?
massive business they own.
Yeah.
Other people, my prison looked like a body that weighed 380 pounds. Other people have a 6-pack abs and it's their prison bars. Prisons
Oh,
come in
that's
so many shapes, sizes, and
yeah.
forms, so many. It's everywhere. And I'm so excited. I love talking about freedom because everyone can have it. That's why I
Mhm.
love it. I love talking about purpose because everyone can have it. No, people don't need to be smarter. People don't need more talent. People don't necessarily need more money or more
Mhm.
success. Like freedom and purpose is these things in life that I think matter the most. I think only 3 things in life matter: purpose, freedom, and love.
Mm.
And the good news is, I think anybody can have them. Anybody can.
Mm.
But it takes guts and courage to mine it out of life. It
Yeah.
just
It's
takes some
almost
guts
like
and
the
courage.
purpose of life, I think, is to learn to be free
Yeah.
inside. I think that's
Yeah.
and like you said, once you discover it, well, then the next purpose of life is to help somebody else discover it. You
Yeah.
can't live. There's just something about it. You just cannot live free knowing others aren't, and
Yeah.
that you discovered the key, and this is definitely a key. It's in this chapter that you talk about Alan, who asked you what's holding you back. What is it? What is this holding you back from? I'm going to read from the section that you title "Your Story." to your readers. It says, I am overwhelmed with excitement at the thought of you taking this next step. And I love that. And I truly believe, especially just meeting you in person, that you really
Mhm.
are overwhelmed with excitement to see
Yes.
somebody do this. You're that's not hyperbole. It might sound like it, but it's not. And anybody who's working with you in person knows that. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let me start over. I'm overwhelmed with excitement at the thought of you taking this next step. But let me tell you why. I'm excited because people need you. You have a gift to offer people. I'm not dreaming of your problem going away. I'm dreaming of your purpose being lived out. I
Mm.
am dreaming of the look in your eyes when you start to live free. The results of freedom come along over the course of time, but I want you to leave the cage you are in. You may have focused on your problem for so long that you are dreaming about that problem being gone. But what if you started to dream about the difference you can make?
Oh,
Talking about replacing problem with purpose, right?
I, I, I have goosebumps right now thinking about someone reading this book and reading that section right there.
Hmm.
But it's not because they're reading something I wrote, because
Right.
I'm just a person like the reader. That person reading that book, there are people surrounding their life. And I want the people in their life to see them living out their purpose and the ripple effect of change that can come from that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's it's unbelievable. The person, anyone watching this podcast, anyone reading my book, your the people in your life, they're almost they don't know it, but it's like they're waiting with bated breath for you to just
Yeah.
step out of the
Yeah.
cage you've been in.
There's a rush of positivity that comes into the world when you do that. And
Yes.
if there's anything this world needs, it needs positivity and it needs light. And
Yep.
you can be a light bearer when you are positive and motivated. And everyone else who's stuck, we're struggling with motivation. And it's
Yep.
just, yeah, it's powerful. It is really powerful. So the other part, I have all these arrows going from here to here to here to here. So the next arrow, I'm shooting over now to the challenge, or the basically you give them some thoughts that can be helpful to them. There's a number of them, but I'm just going to read the first one, unless you want to talk about the others too. It says, here are three thoughts that may be helpful to you right now. And so the first one is, you don't have to believe that your comeback can happen.
Ugh.
Well, now that's unusual. That got my attention. I'm like, what? Wait, did I read that right? You don't have to believe that your comeback can happen. You don't have to believe it. Like, that
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 surprised me.
that
And
is
so
so important
yeah.
because that's what's caused the trap to begin with.
Yeah.
Is people over the course of time convince themselves that once this thing is fixed, then I will go do this thing. No,
Mhm.
go do that thing right now. Go
Yeah.
do it now.
Just don't wait for it. But here you
Yes, don't
write,
wait to be
and
fixed.
I underlined and I wrote, so true. So you said, sometimes our beliefs are simply feelings we have. I want to read that a second time. Sometimes our beliefs are simply feelings we have.
Yeah,
Our feelings will betray us. They will never be an effective driving force to change. The steps we need to take will not make sense to our feelings. Do you want feelings or do you want change? And man, that I think this is probably the biggest gold nugget in the whole thing right there. And it's something I'm only just recently coming to understand myself, because I find that I'm motivated one day and then my feelings come into it and I start feeling, you know, tired or feeling discouraged, or, these feelings that creep in, and we just have to ignore our feelings. That's
yeah.
not easy to do, but wow, it is
It
so
is
true.
it is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to get my feelings excited about my purpose. That's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Feelings don't always have to be a negative thing, of course. But if we're focused on our problem, it's also easy to get our feelings to line up with our thinking and be like, yeah, you are really a loser. You really shouldn't do anything today.
Mhm.
But when I focus on my purpose, my feelings will jump on board that bandwagon too, really quick.
Yeah. I love that last part. Do you want your feelings or do you want change? And I think that we are in a society that is very conditioned to run on feelings. There's so much offense that people take, and their feelings are hurt. And I mean, that isn't to say that we shouldn't be sensitive to others' feelings, of course, but we are letting our feelings become a master of what we do or don't do in life. And I think that's one of the traps that's
Yeah.
set for all of us, and it's easy to fall into because um, it's just such a mainstream accepted way to behave now, is to say,
Yeah.
well, my feelings tell me that something is right or something is wrong. Well, you know, our
Yeah.
feelings can be very fickle though. They're not static at all. They move around.
I think people can have a lot more good feelings,
Yeah.
but we keep thinking when my problem is gone, I'll have good feelings.
Uh,
Well, what if you chase your purpose and create the good feelings that come along with doing
mhm.
purposeful and meaningful things with other people?
I just think that when we have strong emotions and strong feelings, we do need to kind of step back, and especially when they get in the way of the progress we're trying to make. I think
Mm,
that's the key, really, is to be able to say, yeah, let's do what generates the good feelings, but whether they're good or bad. Have you ever heard this story? I forget where I heard it. That it was I think it takes place in the Orient or somewhere, and there's a man in his field, and he has something good happens, and his neighbor's like, you're so lucky. He's like, yeah, maybe. And then
yes.
he gets a horse, and then his son falls off the horse and breaks his
Yeah.
back, and or something bad happens. He's like, oh, you're so unlucky. He's like, yeah, we'll see. Anyway, the idea is that his life just keeps these problems become good and bad, and they just
Yeah.
yin yang back and forth. And it's kind of like, okay, I kind of like that. I want to adopt that sort of like, okay, we'll see. I'm just going to keep moving to that purpose and enjoy the good feelings when they come, and try to ignore the bad ones when they come.
Yeah.
But I love that. I just think that's so key. So now I want to jump. There's so much good in here. I could talk with you for a couple hours and probably give away most of your book. But there was something at the end that really got me, and I love this because all through the book we have this analogy that you created of walking on our path, and then things happen and we go hide in the bush, and then at the very end, you kind of reveal where this analogy comes from.
Mm,
I'm just going to read a paragraph from it. It says, Adam and Eve were living a bold life. They were bold and free in their relationship with God and with each other. But then something went wrong, and their perspective completely changed. In a moment, they went into the bushes to hide. They hid from God and covered themselves in shame from each other. And I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, look at that. Look where he got that bush
yeah.
idea. And isn't that just like the core of our human history, that
Yeah.
many of us, whether you believe it or not, I mean, of course I do, and you talk about the scriptures being such an influence in writing this book, but right from the very beginning, look at how that bush became that hiding spot and
Yeah.
what it prevented them from being, which is bold and positive and all these
Yeah.
things we're talking about.
We were
Yeah, I love
created
that.
for purpose, freedom, and love. And the question is, are we going to have it or not?
Yeah,
And
and
we can,
and the thing is that we hold the key. We hold the key to it. We
yeah,
really do. And
there's
but
just
just
one step to take.
but we just
You're
don't know
free.
how. We don't know how to find it on our body. Where is it? In which pocket, right? And how
Yes.
do we use it? And that's what you're teaching in this book. You really are. So I'm going to shift to the next question. That is to talk about your title and the cover of your book. And of course, your cover is very striking. I want to bring it up, and I'd love to hear the story behind how you came to create this cover and title.
The title just came out of uh, just the work that we do with people and how it's just this one step. Are you going to stop hiding your story? As long as you're hiding your story, you're trying to fix yourself, there's no way out of that prison. There's no way out. And so, one step to freedom, that it's just as simple as the work that we do with people that we've seen. It's what happened in my life, and it's what I see happen in so many people's lives. Is this one step to freedom, and understanding that step. As far as the cover, that was just someone who that we hired to help us with the publishing of the book, and they had someone who works on covers, and so he came up with some designs, and that's the one I picked. So, not a real fancy inspiration behind the cover.
Oh, I love it. I was drawn to it, of course, because I work with prisoners, and so I was like, wow, it's a very there's energy in that picture. There's definitely, with the breaking, there's just something, it's almost like a tangible energy, I think, that you were able
Yeah,
to capture in that image. I love it. I love it. So let's shift to the last question that I have for you. As we've just talked about your cover and your title, and that is what advice you have for aspiring authors. And you definitely started out talking about how important it is for people to share their stories. So this is your chance to kind of give them some encouragement to get it
yeah.
done.
If you want to be an author, get clear on why you want to be one to begin with. Like, just in a sentence, why do you want to be an author? Because it takes a lot of work, obviously. You need to have a why. But the second thing I would say is, nobody does anything in life on their own. Nobody does anything in life on their own. So find a resource, a person who will help you write that book. They won't write the content, but there's all these other parts that you, as an author, you don't have a gift for. You have a story you may like to write, but there's so many facets of writing a book that I know for me, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I had a story to tell. I knew I wanted to help people, but without the help of people, the book would have never been written. So I would say this: many people want to write a book, and the reason it's not written is not because they're lazy, it's because they don't let people help them. So if you believe that you need to write a book, it's something you want to do, your first step is probably not to write. Your first step is probably to find a resource, someone that helps people write books, and email them, call them, text them, whatever, and say, I want to write a book, but I need help writing it. That is your first step. Do that.
Wow. I love that answer.
It's just
um,
true. I don't
yeah,
listen. We
it's
just
true.
you
It's
and I
true.
just met. I know enough of your work that you're a trusted resource for people that want to write books.
Yeah.
I so want people to take steps in life that they need to make, but you cannot do it alone. It's silly to try. There's no bonus points. If you write a book and you say, "Hey, no one helped me,"
It's
well,
not
number
very much
one,
of a bragging right.
yeah, number one, we're not going to believe it. Number two, we're going to ask you, why did you write a book without having a team of people to be a
Yeah.
resource for you? That's a much better story. So
Yeah.
let someone help you.
You can write your story yourself.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
write a journal yourself. But I think the key is when we say write a book, that word book. If you're
Yes.
going to take your story and turn it into a book, which means to put it into a format that you're reaching out and sharing it with others, you really do need to take the steps to make it the best quality that you can. We're finding that because it's so easy to publish on Amazon, there's a lot of really low quality books. Now, not necessarily low quality stories, but the stories did not make it into a book form that's very readable. Editing, covers terrible, and people really do judge a book by its cover, and I believe they should, because if somebody doesn't take the time to have a really good cover, they probably didn't take the time, that's your signal to the world that you didn't take the time to make sure that your writing was really approachable. And
Mm.
that does take the involvement of other people. We simply don't have the ability to see where a sentence might be hard to understand because we wrote
Yeah.
that sentence, we understand it, right?
Yep.
As an example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The writing of the book should not be you should not do it alone. It's much more fun with other people. I would actually say if you want to write a book, if you try to do it alone, it's going to take you 10 times longer or you'll never get it done.
Yeah,
If
that's
you bring along someone else that understands the process and understands how to help someone write a book, you can probably do it in a matter of months
true. Hmm.
or certainly less than 2 years. And you know better than I do on that. I just know that if you get help, you're going to do it in 1/10 of the time. If you don't get help, you may never do it at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And to circle back to the whole purpose in life, serving people is almost always at the core of a
Yeah,
purposeful life.
yeah,
And truly, we talked about this. I don't know if it was on camera or off, but sharing your story with others can be one of the greatest gifts that you have. I
yeah,
believe that I believe it is the greatest gift that we can give the world,
yeah,
because our story, our book, when you put your story in a format that's shareable, like a book, it's there to help people long after you're not here. You
mm,
know, it really is the value of preserving your wisdom in a book it's just immeasurable.
yeah,
Um,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, Mark, I am so grateful that you came on, and we're gonna have to talk off camera about our prison work, because I just can see so many synergies with the things that you're doing and saying, and I'm really fascinated by it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on.